The Armored Core series has a long history of worlds ruled by megacorporations, and AC6 looks to be no different. It's a common theme that there'll be a handful of massive corporations, a few subsidiary companies and other groups vying for power, rebel groups looking to gain a foothold in the power struggle, oppressed workers looking to fight back against their corporate masters, and sole individuals looking to change the world forever, for better or worse. And while we don't yet have a ton of information on the various groups in AC6 vying for power, there's a lot of information that can be gained by looking at the footage we do have, the trailers, and the pre-order bonuses. Our first clue as to who really holds power on Rubicon comes to us from the pre-order premium edition, in the form of 4 pin badges. Among all the various groups and corporations in Armored Core 6, these are the only 4 that get special pins. And while we know at least one is a parts manufacturer, it's a safe assumption that all 4 play a large role in the storyline of AC6. Therefore, it's my prediction that these 4 groups are going to be our mega corporations that hold the most power across the planet. In the top left, we have Allmind, abbreviated AM. We don't have too much information on them just yet. Following that, on the top right, we have Arquebus Corporation, energy weapons manufacturers responsible for many of the generators, laser daggers, and swords we see throughout the footage. The bottom left corporation remains to be a mystery, while the bottom right is PCA, and while we don't know their role yet, we at least have a name. While we don't know the specifics, we do know that Armored Core 6 will have multiple endings, and I feel like it's a safe bet to assume you can align yourself with at least a few of these organizations, as well as some others we'll get to a little later in the video. Regardless, I'm sure they'll play a pivotal role in the storyline. Moving on to parts manufacturers, we have Arquebus Corp. Named after the first shoulder-fired gun, a matchlock invented in the 15th century, it's an interesting name choice for a company that revolves around energy usage, rather than kinetic weapons. We get a good look at their products firsthand in the form of this multi-hit sword, of which a blurry screenshot is hidden in the opening sequence of the assembly footage. They also produced the short-range multi-hit laser dagger we see used against the quad-leg AC. Of all the parts manufacturers minus one, we probably have the most information on Arquebus Corp. But there's one bit of info in the gameplay footage that leads me to believe that not all parts manufacturers will be the corporations. And that's this bit on their generator, the VP-20D. It provides more raw power than any other corporate product on the market. The key words here being corporate product. This leads me to believe that not only are all parts not corporation made, but that some actually do provide a higher output than the generator provided by Arquebus. While most of the parts throughout the Armored Core series are developed and created by large organizations or groups, there is precedent for single one-off pieces, the most notable of which is probably White Glint from 4th generation, whose parts were designed by a genius architect and manufactured by Linearc. Moving on from them, we have Furlong Dynamics, and while not too much is known about this organization, they are responsible for manufacturing most of the kinetic missiles we see throughout the footage. And historically throughout the series, it's not unusual for a group to specialize in the type of armaments, weapons, or frame parts that they manufacture. But it's safe to assume a lot of our kinetic missile options will come from Furlong Dynamics. Next up is the group VCPL, of which we don't have a clear shot of their logo. The only sure thing we know about them is that they manufacture the plasma missiles we see used throughout the gameplay footage. Another precedent set by previous generation games, we always have a variety of missiles, including ones that auto-track targets, that move slower and are hard to evade, vertical launch missiles that attack from above, missiles that pincer your enemies, or single giant warheads. Next on the list, and a manufacturer that promises to be among my favorite, is Schneider, a specialist in aerodynamics research They produce lightweight, highly mobile frame parts with an emphasis on aerial combat rather than durability. The producers of the Noctrayer and Cassoir lines, of whose pronunciation I'm sure I'm butchering, they're responsible for the entire frame makeup of the lightweight orange AC we see shown off later in the footage. We do get one manufacturer whose logo I can't quite make out, and whose information we can't quite read on the couple frames of parts that we do get. But out of everything we've seen, the most interesting is probably RAD, or RAD, a group whose logo is plastered all over the level we get footage of, and throughout most of the trailers. It was revealed to press at the Summer Games Fest that RAD are arms dealers. But were they always? We see RAD's logo plastered on the walls throughout the level we have gameplay footage of, and it's a safe assumption that the group owns or created this facility. In addition to the facility itself, we also see their logo on the smart cleaner and various bosses we've been shown, all of which have the look and feel of industrial mining equipment gone haywire. We also get a good look at one part developed by RAD and used throughout the gameplay, the medium-weight bipedal legs 2C-2000 crawler, whose description reads, "Bipedal legs for scout ACs developed by RAD. Originally spec'd for surface surveys of astronomical objects, this model makes up for what it lacks in combat performance with a light energy footprint and commendable ease of use." So we know by this description that at least this set of legs were not developed for combat, but rather for survey work of astronomical objects. We also know that the RAD facility as a whole is absolutely massive and would have been quite a feat to build had it not existed before the Great Calamity, the Fires of Ibis. It's my prediction that RAD were one of the first organizations sent to Rubicon before the Great Disaster, and one of the few groups whose massive infrastructure survived the Great Calamity. With parts spec'd for surveying and giant machines manufactured for mining rather than combat, one can assume that this group was not originally intended for military operation, but rather to explore Rubicon early on and to begin extracting coral from the planet. It's yet to be seen if they caused the Great Calamity, but regardless, it's clear that they played a large role early on. But how does such a well-established group go from being a well-funded mining and exploration operation to a group of arms dealers, whose facilities are overrun with coral addicts, and whose robots have gone haywire and begun attacking at random? I think the secret lies in the fire of Ibis itself. It's my belief that when the Great Calamity happened, the large corporations left Rubicon entirely. RAD and many of its workers were abandoned. After surviving the horrors of the fires of Ibis, and with no corporate funding, an unstable infrastructure, and a lack of resources, they turned to arms dealing as a means to survive, and to coral as a means to cope. Or in the very least, coral was a substance needed for day-to-day operations on the planet, and with continued use and exposure, the workers would become addicted. That may be all we know about the current corporations, but there's a few other groups that will be vying for power on Rubicon, and we can get a brief glimpse at who some of these groups are with the sticker sheets provided in some of the pre-order editions. Starting off on the bottom right, we have a group of 8 emblems, all of which that share a common shape and that are numbered 1 through 8. And it's important to note that this group are emblems rather than logos, in that they belong to individual pilots rather than large corporations. And among these 8 emblems, there are 2 specifically that are the most interesting, starting with number 4, the muzzled dog. And this emblem we've seen before.
One of the infamous handler Walter's hounds. Interesting.
That lightweight AC were shown during the gameplay trailer as the emblem of a muzzled dog. And while we work with him at some point to overcome this so-called wall, we know that he doesn't work for Walter like you. And it's my speculation that he's actually the member of a group directly opposed to Walter. And my evidence for this comes from another emblem on the sticker sheet, and that's going to be member number 1, whose emblem is a fist, tied down but rising up in resistance against those tethers. And if you take a look at the top left of the sticker sheet, there are 2 other very important emblems. They stand alone as pilot emblems on a sticker sheet filled with corporations as well as just game logos, presumably the most important icons of the game. We also see them again as 2 standalone pieces provided by the pre-order bonuses. And these emblems are a raven, presumably a throwback to AC-1 where pilots worked under the raven's nest, as individual mercenaries not aligned to any specific corporation, and a fist holding restraints, facing downward and directly opposed to theme and design shown on the number 1 pilot of the group of 8. A fist that's holding restraints or leashes, the infamous handler Walter and his hounds. And in this game, one of those hounds, that dog of Rubicon, is you. And I definitely expect at least 2 of the endings are going to be you remaining a corporate dog, and you breaking free of those restraints placed on you by Walter. There's a few other emblems to note on the sheet as well, but that we don't know too much about. In the middle left, we have a foot, presumably Tenderfoot, from the pre-order bonuses. Above the group of 8, there's a group of 6 matching logos as well, presumably another group of pilots with their own set of goals and aspirations. At the top of the middle sheet, we have a group of at least 4 flags, and while they may not be as themed as our other groups, I think there's a design thread there in the flag motif. Starting from the left, we have a flag with stars and the scales of justice. Following that, we have what appears to be a fist gripping a flaming pickaxe, likely representing rebellion and workers rising up. Following that, we have the flag of a white bird on a blue background, possibly matching our raven motif and representing freedom. Following that, we have what could potentially be seen as an eclipse, but possibly representing Rubicon itself and the fires of Ibis. The last 2 icons especially share those side stripes and theming, which, if you want to get really speculative, are also shown in the PCA logo on the top right of the back sticker sheet. It's my prediction that these 4 emblems belong to the natives of Rubicon and signify their fight against the corporate oppression of their planet, which, even if it hasn't always been their home, which we don't know, is their home now. The history of the corporations themselves, parts description in the garage, and little nuggets of info you get both through dialogue in the mission, from your handler, as well as the mission descriptions, has always served as the main point of lore in Armored Core. Much like in Elden Ring, only the surface level of the story is given to you, and if you really want to dive down into it, you have to do a little searching yourself. So tell me in the comments, what are your predictions and speculations? Who's going to fight for what? And in this great conflict, where do your loyalties lie?